Oh,
Listen, I'll introduce you, Rabbi.
oh, okay.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. It's a great honor and privilege to be hosting Rabbi Binny Freedman all the way from Israel. Rabbi Binny holds a number of different roles, but is currently the Rosh Yeshiva and Dean of Yeshivat Oraita in the Old City, and is previous a commander in the Israeli Defense Force. Rabbi Binny and I go way back. I remember hearing Rabbi Binny when I was in high school back in South Africa. I've subsequently been participated in his as a rabbi in his the Israelite program of training rabbis, as well as having Rabbi Binny come speak to a group that I led of Christians and Jews in Israel a couple of years back. He really is a masterful storyteller, Talmid Chacham, and just a wonderful orator. And it is a great zchus to be hosting him this Yom Hazikkaron to share some ideas and share some thoughts. Thank you, Rabbi Binny.
It's a strange day to see you again. I've had the privilege of sharing thoughts with people from Australia, but this is the first time I'm doing it after actually having visited Australia and being able to picture Sydney. I think that the Jews of Sydney actually will have a good excuse when Hashem asks you why you didn't come home. They'll say, "What do you mean? Look where you put us." That being said, this is a difficult day to say hello. Yom Hazikkaron, Memorial Day, I grew up in America. It's very different in Israel. And this year particularly will be even more difficult because alongside sort of the general challenge of tens of thousands of families and hundreds of thousands of, I don't know anybody in Israel who doesn't know anyone that fell in Israel's battles, victims of terror, which is also this day. But there is one powerful experience on Yom Hazikaron, is that all those families, they get a hug. I have a friend I'm very close with. We have a chavrusa. We learn together every Friday. His son, David Golaventzas, was killed on duty in Hebron 2.5 years ago. He was an officer in Golani. And I was asking him, what will it be like for you this Yom HaZikaron, this Memorial Day? And he said, look, on the one hand, Yom HaZikaron is not a different day for me because every day is Yom HaZikaron. No day goes by where a family doesn't think about someone they loved. And it's not in the big picture, it's in the details. It's when you set the table Friday night for Shabbos, and you always used to set it for 6, and now you set it for 5, or do you set it for 6? It's when someone asks you, how many kids do you have? How do you answer that question? And on and on. But he said, on Yom HaZikaron, I feel like we get a hug. This is the first year that I will not be at Har Herzl, on Mount Herzl, Israel's national memorial cemetery, with 60, sometimes 100,000 people. There's something that's indescribable about watching 60,000 people just stop and pause. So I commend you that you're trying to capture a little bit of that. I want to share with you 2 stories. And I'm going to do this low tech. I hope that works. I think I was maybe married 2 years. Actually, that's not true. This is even before I got married. So you're talking about over 30 years ago. And I had taken a job as a madrich, as a dorm counselor in one of the local yeshiva high schools here. And I had to, Rev Riskin actually was the one who sort of told me really why, and I agreed, and I was young. But in order to finish off the process and officially get the job, I had to meet with the principal. But I kind of knew that I had the job. We're not talking about, an educational director, a dorm counselor. And I went to the principal's office. I had a meeting, and I'm sitting outside waiting for my meeting. And I see a boy sitting there, and he looks quite dejected. His name was Dvir, which means lion cub. And he had that look of the kids sitting outside the principal's office. I know that look well. I spent many hours outside the principal's office when I was in school. I'm sure there's someone here on the Zoom who is smiling thinking about this. And we started up a conversation. I have a soft spot for kids like that, who like to challenge. And I hit it off with him. He's a dynamic kid, enthusiastic, whatever. It was interesting to talk to him. And then, sort of I had to go into the meeting. And he said, Yalla. And he was going into 11th grade. I went into the meeting and I sat with the principal. And, he asked me a whole bunch of questions, et cetera. And then at the end I said, okay, I'm happy to agree that it makes sense to me and we're going to hire you and you're going to start in September. At the end of the meeting, before I got up, I don't know why I said this. I just maybe want to impress the new boss. I don't know. I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. That boy sitting outside, Dvir Mochaim, is he going to be in my machzor, right? Is he going to be one of my students next year? And he looked up kind of a little surprised and he said, actually, probably not. I doubt he's going to be here next year. So I don't know what made me say this. Almost as soon as I walked out of the office, I was like, wow, that was a really dumb thing to say. But I said to him, if he stays, I'll take him on as a project, right? He looked at me a little surprised and he basically said, okay, duly noted, whatever. And that was it. I forgot about it. This was like in April, March. I show up for the job in, end of August. And I'm meeting now with the head of the dormitories and we're going through all the students, whatever. And we get to this boy's name, Dvir Mochaim. And I barely remembered his name. And he looks up at me and he says, and I understand you've agreed to take this boy on as a special project. I'm like, oh, I guess that was a bad move. But, you make a commitment. And I took him on as a project. And it was a life-changing experience for both of us. He just flowered. He was a leader. He was dynamic. I used to sit with him. We used to learn. I put him in charge of all sorts of things. And he was a success story. And in the end, 2 years later, he graduated. I ended up moving with the Machzor, so I had him for 2 years. He went to Eli, Midreshet Eli, pre-Israeli Mechina, military academy, whatever. Did really well there and was drafted into the paratroopers. It is not easy to draft into the paratroopers. I understand this, but I have a son in the paratroopers. You have to go through a gibush. It's not easy. Not everybody gets in. You have to be in good shape. You have to pass interviews, and he was a superstar. They even sent him to commander's course. He became a commander. And, we were sort of in touch, but not so in touch. This was before social media. The worst way to find out something like this is sitting in your living room. I was sitting watching the news and wasn't expecting this. Dorit was in the kitchen. We were in this small little Kollel apartment. And all of a sudden they called his name out over the news. This is a picture of him, if you can see this. This is Dvir Mochaim. He was 20 years old. This was 3 days before Shavuot. He was on a mission into Lebanon, and the officer in charge made a terrible mistake. You can't really blame him. When you do these ambushes late at night in the rain or whatever, by the time you finish, you're exhausted. They were about 2 kilometers away from the border, heading back into Israel. At night, when you walk at night, you're supposed to keep rivchei laila. You're supposed to sort of narrow down the distances. In the day, you have a lot of distance between each soldier, so that God forbid, if somebody opens up on you or throws a grenade, they don't take out the whole patrol. But at night, for all sorts of reasons, you actually stay much closer together. You're literally supposed to stay, imagine putting out your arm, you're supposed to stay arm's length. I guess because they were close to the border, they could actually see the lights of Israel distance. And he kind of let down his guard, and the distances were spreading out. It was a foggy night. He wasn't paying attention, and the patrol line, the column heading back in, started to curve around itself. They didn't realize coming down the hills that they were walking the wrong way. And as they started curving, the people in the back were also sort of walking in a curve, and the front of the column, now the distances had opened up, sort of started heading back towards the back of the column without realizing it over a period of kilometers. And all of a sudden they see silhouetted, sort of people in the distance. Now you're in Lebanon and you know how this works. I mean, there's no other Israeli army unit in the area. This is done in tandem with all the other units. You don't send out an ambush and then have another Israeli unit in the area. So you only have a mission like this if it's clear there's no one else there. And if you see silhouettes with guns in the distance, you know that they're Hezbollah, that they're terrorists. So he did exactly what you're supposed to do. He hit the ground, gave the order to fire, and they opened up. And the terrorists, who were their own boys, returned fire. And in the crossfire, this is called a dutz dadi, Dvir and Ezra Asher were killed. I can't even begin to describe to you. How do you go to a funeral? There's no words. devastated parents. Hundreds of people show up. 19, 20 years old. His whole life ahead of him. I remember being in the army at that age. So many things have happened since then. Just destroyed in a moment. You know, a few years ago, I was at Har Herzl for a totally different reason. There was a group that came to Israel. They asked me if I would go there, show them a couple of things. And I spent a little time with them, and then they left. And I was already at Herzl. I went to visit, you know, a couple of friends of mine. I have, unfortunately, too many friends buried on Har Herzl. And I decided to visit Dvir. I hadn't seen his grave in a while. I went to visit him, and I, you know, had my thought process. And as I was walking down the steps from where his grave happens to be in Har Herzl, there was a piece of paper on the floor. There had been a ceremony there the day before for whatever, something else. And I hate litter, but I hate litter on Har Herzl. That a piece of paper guard. So I bent down to pick it up, right? Just, you know, to throw it out. And I glanced at it, and I realized it was a letter. And it looked crumpled, and it was hard, like it had been in the rain, dry. It had obviously been there for a while, and eventually I guess it had floated out, or the rocket moved that it was holding it down, and it flew off. And it was addressed to Dvirush. And because it was only about, 15 feet from his grave, I realized this was a letter to Dvir. For many years, I thought this was his mother. I finally had the opportunity to give the letter back to Dvir's father. His mother passed away a number of years ago. And it turns out this isn't her handwriting, it was his aunt. Dvirush, כבר תתבב שנים, 15 years, שאני אחרי הפרידה הקשה, since this difficult goodbye. הבלתי נתפסת ממך, the inexplicable, beyond comprehension goodbye from you. שנה אחר שנה, year after year, אנחנו מסרבים לשכוח אותך, refuse to forget you. לא רוצים וגם לא יכולים. We can't, and we don't want to. אתה ריחקת אך אצלנו קרוב נשארת. You have become distant, but you are always close to us. יש בליבנו מקום שהוא רק שלך. There is in our heart a place which is only yours. מרווח, a space, שאינו מצטמצם עם הזמן. It doesn't contract, it doesn't get smaller, this gaping hole inside of us. געגועים, longings, nishanim b'chol irua mashmauti b'chayenu, that come up again in every practical, in every celebration. And I have a cousin who was killed in 2006 in the Second Lebanon War. No family event has ever been the same since. It changed every wedding, every bar mitzvah, every brit, every simchat bat, everything. ובכל מפגש שאנו זוכים ורואים את הצעצועים שנוספו למשפחתנו, and in every mifgash, in every meeting, in every celebration, where we merit to see the new additions, the children that have joined our family. Anu mesaprim lahem, Dvir, sheyesh od ben dod. We tell them, there's another cousin, another partner, sheyesh lo chelek b'chayenu, who's a part of our lives. Anu chasrei milim, we have no words. We give them the morasha, גם בשמם של כל השותפים באהבתנו אליך, in our love for you. That's one letter of one boy from one family. There are almost 25,000 families who will remember every day those who fell. The boys and girls that never came back. The empty chair at the table. I want to tell you another story. This one's a little more difficult. Danny was my closest friend. He took me under his wing when I was in Gush. When I got to yeshiva, I went to Israel when I was 18 years old. And I thought I was going for a year. Fell in love with Israel, fell in love with learning, decided to stay a second year. Rabbi Blackman will remember this because we were there around the same time. And decided I couldn't leave, felt if I was going to stay, I should do the right thing. I should join the army. And the second year that I was in Gush, my Shana Bet, I thought I should get to know the Israelis who I was going to be going in with. They had come and joined us sort of, after when I was already starting my second year. I didn't really know them. They were a year younger than me, but I was going to go into the army with them. I thought I would get to know them. So every night at dinner in the yeshiva, I would sit at their table and I would try to get to know them. Now, I didn't know much Hebrew back then. and they didn't know much English, I guess. So our conversations consisted of, could you please pass the salt? And would you, I need a piece of bread, right? And it wasn't really going anywhere. And it was actually painful, to be honest. And my friends, my American friends, they would like watch this ritual because, you go sit at lunch, you sit with the people you're comfortable with. I would sit with them for other meals. My son, come here. My son just walked in. I haven't seen him for 7 weeks. Sorry for interrupting. The very thing when you're finished. Okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. That's my son Yair. He's in Olev Tzilchanim, and because of Corona, he's been in the army for 7 weeks. I haven't seen him, and he finally got out today. So I apologize. I don't apologize actually. And so my friends would say to me, like, what are you doing there? Like, well, you just look like you're suffering. What's the point? And I was really starting to think this was a waste of time. I wasn't developing a relationship with anybody. And so I figured, okay, you know what? I'm sitting at dinner that particular night, and I'm getting ready to kind of, load up my tray. And there was a boy I happened to be sitting next to him that night. I remember this. His name was Donnie. He was clearly the ringleader of the group. He was tall. He was very handsome. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, flashing grin. He would say things that were obviously hysterically funny because all the guys would laugh. Of course, I wouldn't understand the joke. I would just smile along. And he was very doughy. There were no, it's not an accident that the Israeli national fruit is a sabra. It's prickly, thorny on the outside. You have to get to the inside to get to the sweet. He was mamasha. And he looks at me, he goes, Tagidli, manero ti mata osepo. He said, tell me something. I'm just curious. Like, why do you sit here every night? Well, what are you doing here? And my mouth, I'm like, I couldn't believe that somebody would actually ask that. Like, that wasn't the way I would, like, so I look at him and I'm holding my tray and I said, you know what? I'm going into the army with you. And I thought that maybe I would get to know you and it would be easier when I went into the army, but I guess I was wrong. Okay. And off I walked. I just couldn't believe it. So he comes over to me later that day in his very straightforward fashion. And he says to me, Tagita, do you want to have a chavruta? Do you want to learn together, have a study partnership? And I was a little surprised. I was like, wow, this is it. This is pay dirt. Like, I'm finally going to get to know somebody. I said, yeah, for sure. I would love to have a chavruta. So he says, okay. The only thing is, like, it's 2 months into the year already. Like, we don't, all of our time is full. Would you be willing to do it at 1:30? So my kind of heart dropped. Like 1:30, that's like, that's the break. We learn in the morning. Yeshiva schedule is a very difficult schedule. We would wake up at 6:30. We would, have davening and learning. And then finally at 1 o'clock, you have lunch. And then you have a break till 3, till the afternoon service, mincha. That was the time to play ball, take a nap. I'm like, 1:30. But you know what? You wanted this. If you're going to get to this is the way it's, I said, yeah, let's do that. So we're going to have a 1:30 chavruta. Okay. So, that afternoon, 1:30 comes, and I go from lunch back to the base madrash, back to the study hall. I'm sitting in the Beit Midrash in the study hall, 1:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock, 2:15, no Dani, right? And I'm like waiting. And now I'm getting annoyed. But of course, it's already 2:15. When am I going to go back to like, what's the point? So I just sat and learned with the other 60 tzaddikim, righteous people, and I, went to mincha. And after mincha, after the afternoon service, I went looking for Dani. And I find him, he's sitting up in his place, like by the rampa, like up on top in the Beit Midrash. And I go over to him and I say to him, like, what happened? I thought we said we'd have a chavruta at 1:30. He looks at me and goes, huh? I said, I was waiting for you. It was 1:30, 2 o'clock. What happened? He says, oh, no. 1:30 in the morning. 1:30 in the afternoon, I have another chavruta. I learn with somebody in the kollel. I go to whatever. I usually finish at 1:15. I figured I'll grab a cup of coffee, and then at 1:30 we'll learn for half an hour. But if that's too much for you, like I said, no, okay, I'm happy to do that. And we started learning at 1:30. And from that day, Danny decided that he was going to take me under his wing. Every time one of the guys in our Machzor had a birthday, he made sure I was there. Every time they planned a teal on a Friday, I went with them. Everything. He started to quiz me on who the guys were and what their names were, right? He would ask me words and teach me slang. He was determined. In fact, when we finally went into the army, I actually fought. I spent an extra day in the bakum in the base, whatever way you get processed, because I wanted to try to be with him in the unit. It didn't work out. I had glasses, and he became much bigger than he was before. When we finished our first stint, back then you did a stint in the army, then you came back to Yeshiva for 6 months, and then you went back. So we picked up our chavruta, we learned together. And I remember one day I was walking up the steps to the Beit Midrash, and there used to be a bank of payphones. Some of you might not know what a payphone is, but they used to have these public phones. And I see him, and he's kind of hunched over one of the phones, and I distinctly heard him giggle. Now, Danny didn't giggle. He was like a very straightforward, very serious, very into his learning. And I had heard from somebody that he had met a girl. I didn't know what the story was because he didn't talk about these private things. So I walked over to have some fun with him. And as I get closer, all of a sudden I realized he's speaking in perfect English. So my mouth dropped open. And I guess he must have sensed I was there. He turns around and he sees me, flashes me a smile. And I'm standing there waiting. And he gets off the phone and he comes over and gives me a chapcha on the back. And I look at him and I say, "You speak English?" He said, "Of course I speak English. You know, my parents are from England." I said, "Yeah, but I didn't know you speak English." He said, "Yeah, why wouldn't I speak English?" I said to him, "Are you serious? All those years I'm breaking my teeth on Hebrew and you spoke English?" He put his hand on my shoulders. He says, "So Danny," and he says to me, "Tell me something. If I were to talk to you in English, would you ever have learned Hebrew?" That was Danny. You know, there's a story about him that made the papers after he was killed. They were in Lebanon. They were in a mutzav called Milano, near Wali River. And they would do patrols, and they would go through the cherry orchards. Sometimes they'd walk through the melon fields. And it suddenly occurred to him, like, are you allowed to pick these cherries? Now, anybody who's ever been, I spent time in Lebanon, anybody who's ever there knows that the cherries there are amazing. And that's what soldiers do. It was a no man's land. It was like an enemy zone. You would do patrols, and you would pick the cherries. Right? No farmer in his right mind is going to come harvest those cherries. They suddenly realized, who says that the farmer gave up on those cherries, right? There's a sugya, there's a concept, person, the owner has to give up on it if you're allowed to eat from it. So he became sort of enamored of this idea, and he was struggling with it. And he finally managed to get Rav Amital. Rav Amital was our Rosh Yeshiva, the head of our yeshiva, on the phone. Not an easy thing to do. We didn't have cell phones back then. You only had like 3 minutes to use the phone line before somebody else got it. But Rav Amital was a very busy man. He tracked him down. And Rav Amital, of course, said, "No, you actually can't eat it. It might be gezel, it might be theft." And he made it his business to make sure to tell all the guys in the unit that they couldn't eat the cherries. And when they walked through the melon fields, his mother once told me, he would make sure that nobody stepped on the melons. And guys would laugh at him, like, "What are you, we're in the middle of a war zone, what about minefields?" And he would say, "When this is all over one day, some farmer's going to come back here. And he's going to need to earn a living. And we should make sure not to destroy his living." Who thinks like that? And I'm walking up the steps and I see Danny and I realize he was a different life. You know when I really got this? I really got it at my wedding. At my wedding, so we have a custom amongst us that we, the families of those who fell, they're always invited. And this was only 4 or 5 years after Danny was killed. So they came to the chuppah, they came to the wedding. And after we came out and we, did the first dance, so they were leaving. I guess they couldn't stay. I think it was too painful for them. And so somebody said to me, they're leaving. Almo's parents were there. And I walked over to say goodbye, and I saw it in his mother's eyes. I suddenly realized they weren't at my chuppah. They weren't at my wedding. They were at his. They were wondering, who's the girl that he would never meet? Who were the children that would never be born? Who were the grandchildren that would never bounce on his knees? That tree was cut down. I'm 56 years old. I have 4 children. You just saw one of them. I have 3 grandchildren. 2 of my children are married. All the things that we've done since 1985. And Danny is 20 years old forever. And that is Yom Hazikkaron. And it's a difficult question. How do we deal with this? The Gemara in Sanhedrin, a very strange Gemara. The Talmud says that King David asked God, right? I notice at the beginning of the Shemona Esrei, at the beginning of the silent Amidah that we have, It says Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Yaakov. How come it doesn't say Elokei David, the God of David? It's a strange question. It sounds a little arrogant. But the commentators explain David doesn't need to see his name in lights. What he was recognizing is that there was something that was brought into this world. Avraham taught the world the power of loving kindness, of doing, of giving. Yitzchak teaches us the power of accepting, receiving, surrender, gvura. Yaakov teaches balance. David, the King David, was supposed to bring something into the world. He obviously hasn't done it yet, right? Royalty. We still don't have a king. So Hashem says to him, very simple, they were tested by me, and you weren't. So David says, Naseni, test me. So God says, you want to be tested? Okay, I'll test you. And he tests him. And for those of you who know the story of David and Bathsheba, goes up on his roof, he sees a beautiful woman, he yearns for her, he makes terrible mistakes, for which he later pays a tremendous consequence. So he basically fails the test. And you wonder what that Gemara is about. What is that Talmud saying? What's the purpose of having a test if you're going to fail? What's the purpose of a test? So one of the commentaries on that Sefer, Mender Shmuel, says a phenomenal thing. He says, the word nisayon, because this is our question. How can we stand up to this test? Why are we tested so? Nobody wants to be Avram and Sarah offering up their son on the binding of Isaac. So one of the commentators suggests, the root of the word nisayon is nes, is a miracle. The truth is, a true nisayon, the true challenges we have in life, it's not possible for a person to overcome that. The fact that King David says, test me, means he doesn't understand yet that the definition of a test is it's not possible. So he needs to fail the test. He needs to understand we're not really able to climb these mountains. So what is a test? And I'll give you an example. If you would have gone to a Jew in 1945 in the shadows of Buchenwald in Auschwitz, imagine God comes to the Jewish people. He says to the Jewish people, listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to build the state of Israel. You know what we should have said to him? We should have said to him, that's impossible. That's impossible. We're hundreds of thousands. We've been massacred. There's nothing left of us. There are hundreds of thousands of Jews wallowing in refugee camps all across Europe. This is not possible. Right? God comes to Avraham and he says to Avraham, offer up your son, your only son, Isaac, Yitzchak. You know what Avraham should say? That's not possible. You told me that through Yitzchak, the Jewish people will be born. If I offer him up, if I slaughter him, it's not possible. You know what God says to Avraham? He says, you're right, it's impossible. Now go do it. Hashem says to the Jewish people, you're right, it's not possible. Now go do it. On the one hand, there is something so powerful about this day, but the essence of the Nisayon is that it's not possible. We should not be here. We were surrounded by 7 Arab armies. We had no tanks, we had no planes, we had no guns, we were outnumbered 15-1. We shouldn't be here. I have a friend who was in West Point Military Academy in America. And he actually, it's a longer story, but he gave them strategic advice. And then he came to Israel, made Aliyah, he lives in the Golan, and he actually does that for the Israeli army. And I actually got a lot of really good advice from him during the second Intifada. He probably saved some of the lives of my men. And he told me an amazing story. He said that at West Point, in the 3rd year of that 4-year military academy, this is the elite of American command. It is very difficult to get into West Point. They have a year where they basically learn strategic command, parity, how to create battle plans, etc. It's interesting, in Israeli officers course, they have something similar. We do it for a week. They do it for a year. I'll leave you to judge who has a better system, but okay. And at some point, the entire 3rd year cadets are gathered together, and they're given like a military assignment. And then they have to go into groups, they have to break it up, and they have to figure out strategically how do they carry the day, how do they solve this problem. On this particular day, the base commander is the one presenting them with the problems. This is a big deal. And they all break up into their working groups, and they all come back one by one over the next few hours, and they all say, this is impossible. This is a trick question, right? One of the challenging things to learn as an officer is when you actually have to retreat, when the odds are against you, and you have to know how to pull out in time and save the day. So they're thinking this is a mistake, and they need to know that this is unwinnable. And the brigade commander said, the base commander says, nope, there's a solution to this problem. So they go back and they work on it. Nobody can come up with a solution. At the end of the day, it's 6 o'clock in the evening before dinner. They're all gathered together, and the base commander says, you're actually right. This is the story of the Israelis on the Golan Heights in 1973. And it is not possible. What happened there is not possible. And the reason that we shared this day with you is because you need to know that in addition to all the strategy that we study, we have to believe in the impossible. The concept of a nisayon, of a challenge, a true challenge, is it's not possible that the Jewish people is a normal people after the Holocaust. And it's not possible that these families are able to overcome this challenge. It's not possible. And by the way, when you look at the impossible and you realize that it happened anyway, it tells you that there's a silent partner. There's something miraculous in this story. Hashem is watching us. There is no other way to explain the state of Israel, and I believe there is no other way. We don't understand this. Anybody who thinks that he can explain, whether it's a child in a cancer ward or a soldier falling or the Holocaust, we don't have the capacity to understand. It's not possible. But we do have the ability to be there, to be present. For those families that have given up everything, for whom this week is a very difficult week. So in Danny's memory, in Dvir's memory, and in so many others, I thank you. Thank you for taking the time to think about these things and to join us. And I wish you a meaningful day on Yom Hazikkaron itself, which will be tonight at 8 o'clock Israel time. I have no idea what time that is in Australia. There is a tefillah, there is a siren that will sound. It's very easy to get online these days and listen to the radio online. You manage to be online listening to the radio news. Rabbi Krebs, if you send me a WhatsApp, I can send you a link to do that. You can actually hear the Israeli siren in that moment. Every citizen of the state of Israel, every Israeli everywhere will take a pause and stand in silence and think about those who fell. Hashem should bless us that next year we're celebrating because we don't need armies anymore and we don't have to remember anymore, and things get better soon. B'ezrat Hashem. And I thank you for listening, and I wish you all tremendous hatzlacha, and I look forward to seeing you in Israel one day soon. By the way, this is Danny's picture. If you want to see what Danny looked like, that was Danny. Doesn't do him justice, but thank you very much, everybody.
Binny, thank you so much. So moving, and we really appreciate it all the way from this side of the water. Sending you a big hug to you and all of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Thank you, everybody. The program continues. I'm now going to hand over to Rabbi Shua Solomon, who's going to continue the program. So, Rav Shua, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Rav Gad. And thank you, Rav Binny, who's always amazing and a very hard act to follow. What Ariel and I, who are here tonight to talk a little bit about Yom Hazikkaron and some of the special people in our lives that gave up their lives for the state of Israel. And as we know, it's a little bit of a different Yom Hazikkaron. We're in the same screen, but obviously practicing social distancing. Thanks, Ariel. And instead of a speech directly to you, we want to, in a lot of respects, invite you sort of into our living room as we have a chat about some of the people that are so important to us. I mentioned on Thursday when I gave a little bit of a speech on Facebook about the upcoming days, Yom Hazikkaron, Yom Ha'atzmaut, about the journey that I took at one of the operations in Gaza. I was on the bus. We were making our way down to the border, to the southern border, and the friend who I'd already been in the army with for almost a year and a half turns to me and says, you know, I was born, I knew I was going to fight for the state of Israel. I knew this was going to be my life. I thought that there was a big possibility I'd at one point have to fight in a war, but you could be in your bed in Australia at the moment. Look how unlucky you are that instead you're on your way to war. And I said to him at the time that so many people regard what he saw as something he grew up with, and something which anyone who wasn't born in, why would you want to do it? So many people regard it as a privilege. So many people around the world were praying and supporting the Chayalim, the soldiers, the IDF, as they are not just in times of war, but every day. Ariel and I, and the reason why we're speaking together is actually because we were in the army together quite a few years ago. In fact, it almost seems like a world ago. Actually, Ariel, I only just found out now that you're younger than me. I was absolutely terrified of you in the army. I was actually, although Ariel was younger than me, Ariel was much more senior than I was in the army. I was what's called a Tzair, someone who just begun their army service, and Ariel was already a sergeant towards the end of his army service. And I actually remember, in particular, I must have been in the army about 2 months. I was terrified that you were going to punish me. We were standing there on what's called a Mizdayet Tziyah, which is the sort of the final farewell that you give, where you give your salute before you get to go home for the weekend. And we were standing there in the cold 6 a.m. Friday morning, and just the face and the way you looked at me, and I was just terrified of you the entire time we were in the army. And actually, only about 3 or 4 years ago, a picture of you and Gemma popped up on my Facebook, and I look at the picture and I say, oh, I said to Michal, my wife, I know that guy from somewhere. It's been quite a few years, and the army is sort of its own world. And just because you know someone from the army, sometimes it's hard to transport that picture and that person outside the army in a different context. And I couldn't work it out, and I went back to my army pictures, and I realized who you were, and we've reconnected since then. On a more serious note, we're here tonight. We served just to give a bit of an introduction, we served together in the Nachal Infantry Unit, in Gdud Shacham, Gdud 931. Ariel, like I said, was a bit more senior than me, but what we had in common is a special friend that we lost in one of the operations in Gaza. But Ariel, maybe you want to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Shiva, for inviting me.
It's our lounge room, you can just call it short.
Exactly. Hi, Shiva, Chaya, and thank you everybody who's listening tonight. So I'll share a bit about myself. I'm Ariel, I'm from Israel. I was born and raised in Ramat Gan. And I'm trying to put it in the context of how grief through the army has touched me in my life, and will go all the way from my childhood, I think, towards Oded Ben Sira, which is a very, very special guy that served at the same time as Rabbi Shua, and I was also his sergeant major. And we'll watch a video about him and explain a bit more about what he did. But I would just like to touch my childhood and my growing up as an Israeli with that effect of grief. So the first thing I remember that has anything related to the army or death in the army was 97. It was the helicopter colliding in air. It was the helicopter catastrophe, what they call it. It's actually people from our unit. One helicopter full of combat soldiers left Lebanon, and the other one was going towards Lebanon, and they collided, and 73 soldiers died then. And one of the boys in my class at school, his brother died. So as you can imagine, a lot of ceremonies and a lot of talks, and just trying to comprehend as a 7-year-old what's happening. And moving forward from there, I think the second time is 2006, the Second Lebanon War. My brother was in paratroopers, and he was in Lebanon. And I remember, in my bedroom watching television, seeing bombs and crazy, crazy pictures. And knowing that your brother inside, I think, is a very surreal feeling, trying to still go to school and still act normal. And obviously, it wasn't an easy experience. Then joining the army, it was March 2009 to the Nachal Brigade. I was never into guns or into anything like that. I think the motivation as an Israeli guy who comes from the Tel Aviv region is mostly, it's the right thing to do. Joining, I think Shua just touched how, in that bus going to the Gaza, how your colleague or your friend, your mate told you, why are you here? So I think from an Israeli perspective, and again, we're just following a very hard act of Rabbi, we're talking more from a from your average Israeli from Tel Aviv region, what his motivation. I grew up in a religious family, and obviously Zionism is important to me, but I think the thing that really leads you is ego, first and foremost, for a lot of people. My brother did it, my father did it, my cousins did it, my uncles did it. Who am I not to do it? At least become a combat soldier and try really to do my best. So I joined the Nachal Brigade, and after 8 months of training and advanced training, we went to a couple of months to Yehuda v'Shomron,
Judea and Samaria.
Judea and Samaria. And after that, I joined, I went, they sent me to commander course. After commander course, we went back to Judea and Samaria and we joined a team that are regiment commander. He started, and we did a lot of arrests in that area, arrests and a lot of action and a lot of things. It's not Fauda, but it still was pretty hectic. And after that, I got my own squad, and I was with them for over a year as a commander, then as a sergeant. And at the last 6 months or 5 months of my my service, I was a staff sergeant.
You got to look after me.
And I got to look after Rabbi Shua and the rest of his mates, which was really cool.
Interesting.
At this stage, I didn't have really a connection. Sorry, I was 4 months in Lebanon with the soldiers before doing stakeouts most of the time, and then the rest in there. And then then I went to become a staff sergeant, and that was the last 5 months, which is less of a direct connection with the soldiers, but it's more taking care of them behind the scenes. Now, I don't really like to talk about the army usually to Australians, not from a condescending way. Even my wife will know that. It's because sometimes I feel like it gets lost in translation. Even Australians that serve in the army, you can talk to them for hours. But
so tell me, everything you said,
yeah,
how does it feel, especially on Yom Hazikkaron, but in general? You're very far away from home, from the place you grew up in, from where you served. Sydney, Australia is a beautiful place, but very far away from the people that you just spoke about that are so close to you. So how does it feel, not just on Yom Hazikkaron, but every day?
It's a fair question. So I've been living in Sydney for almost 30. I've been living in Sydney for 5 years. I came here for business purposes. I am married to an Australian girl, my wife Gemma. So we're here for now. But again, I was allowed to, my wife allowed me to say that we will find our way back to Israel, and that's all I can say.
Oh, excellent. Good on you, Gemma.
So that's the only thing I can say in that matter.
Thumbs up from her.
And yeah, we try to visit as much as possible. And I do, listen, I feel like in the world that we're living, is it sustainable to live outside of Israel? Well, what has history taught us? I don't know. For now, we're here, but B'ezrat Hashem, you have said it.
And the last 5 months, the last 5 months of your army service was when you got to know a dad.
Yeah.
That we're going to speak a little bit more about. Do you want to just sort of tell everyone and tell me?
So yeah, before you will speak about it a bit more in thorough. That's the special thing about, I think it's a cliche, but the special thing about him, it's this one guy that stands out, this one guy that has a soul that is larger than everyone, and we'll hear about him soon in the video. But I remember that there was something about this guy that was more than you can understand. His smile, his ability to connect with people. I know it's easy saying it in hindsight, but this guy, which we're going to speak about a bit more and see.
So we'll see a video, but I do want to add, before we see the video, what you just say now, I think sums it up in terms of, not only was he always smiling, he kind of wanted everyone else to smile as well. And unfortunately, we're now already for a few years never going to see his smile again. We'd like to show you a video, English subtitles as well, of a little bit, just in a few minutes, who our dad was.
We apologize for the technical difficulties. One moment, please.
Sorry everyone, give us 1 second and hopefully play the video.
Try now.
Okay, can we send it to you?
The link.
The link?
Send it to me in chat. Let's see if I can do it.
כאילו מראש הוא הכין אותנו לזה, כי הוא היה מין משהו שקשה לתפוס בחיים כבר, כאילו מין איזה, כמו להחזיק ענן, זה כזה נפש כזאת שצריכה חופש ומרחב.
הוא הלך לשיעורי גיטרה, והוא התחיל ללמוד גיטרה, ובקונצרט הראשון, לדעתי, שהוא עשה יחד עם החברים שלו, הם ניגנו משהו מהצלליות, הוא התאמן על זה בבית, ואני זוכרת את עצמי פשוט עומדת ונפעמת מהנגינה שלו.
שהוא בצבא, קשה לו בצבא, קשה לו עם הצבא, אבל מה? הוא הולך לפיקוד.
חוויתי ממנו המון את הרצון להיות יותר טוב, את הרצון להשתפר כל הזמן, דיבר על זה המון, כתב על זה.
אני בתקופה לא כל כך טובה בצבא. אני מרגיש שאני כבר הולך ונותן הוראות כמו זומבי, בלי כוח באמת לתת מעצמי לתפקיד. מה שכן, אני חייב לחזור לעבוד על המידות שלי כבן אדם. כי אני מרפא קצת בזמן האחרון, וזה עושה לי רע. להשקיע בכל דבר, להיות אמיתי, ללמוד להיות ישר וטוב.
גודל טבעי. בתוך החופשת שחרור, מחזירים אותם כאילו את היחידה לצבא.
מתחילים לעבור הימים, ואנחנו לא יודעים אם אנחנו נכנסים או לא נכנסים. והזמן שלהם כאילו בין החופשת שחרור לשחרור עצמו הגיע.
ואז ביום רביעי עודד מכנס את החבורה.
ואומר להם, תקשיבו, מה אתם מתווכחים? מי שרוצה, שישאר, מי שלא רוצה, אל תשפטו אותו, שילך, אני יודע שאני נשאר.
זה הגיע הרגע, ממור נכנסים, כולם בלי ספק, מסתכלים אחד על השני וקדימה.
בגדול אני ישבתי ליד עודד על כיסא, הוא עמד ככה עם היד, נשען על הקיר לידי, ואז היה קול נפץ, היה קול של ירי, הבנו שיורים עלינו על הבניין.
לא היה שם איזה טעות מבצעית של מישהו, פשוט כדור שנכנס דרך החלון, ופגע במקרה בעודד בדיוק בין הפינה שהוא היה חשוף אליה.
אני לא זוכר אפילו את מי אני שואל, מי זה? אומרים לי, בן סירה. וזהו, מועקה.
בעיניי הוא היה גיבור. הוא מסר את נפשו ממש בשביל להיות עם החיילים שלו ולפקד עליהם. ככה אני מרגיש. שאני יודע שהוא נתן את נפשו למען מדינת ישראל, אין לי מילה אחרת. בעיניי הוא היה גיבור.
So that was video. There are other videos as well which were translated into no subtitles in English, so we didn't show, but just a little bit about Oded's life. Oded, like we spoke about, Ariel had already been in the army 2.5 years, and it was towards the end of his shikhrur, his release. I actually started with Oded, and we started our Torah, we started our basic training together.
2012.
In 2011, August 2011. Forget these things, but August 2011, we started our training together. And I think everybody who's listening, we'll always have people, and we always know people in our lives that you just want to be around them.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, they just make your life better.
Yeah.
They cheer you up. Even if you're sort of really upset and depressed and having a difficult day, and you definitely have those in the army, they're just people, and this is not just for the army, it's for life. There are people that others gravitate towards because they just make them smile, they cheer them up, and they just give them a really positive outlook on life. And that for me was Oded. Everything. And anytime you saw him, first of all, I don't know if you remember, but I can't remember, at least for me, the vision of him without a smile on his face. And often, I also don't think I can remember, apart from when we were actually training, and obviously he wasn't able to, but any free time, I actually don't remember him without a musical instrument either.
Yeah.
Very musical, and actually, in one of the other videos that don't have English subtitles, one of his friends, Yoav Ari, who was a very close friend of his, talks about as they were about to go to Gaza, everybody's running around, pressured, stressed. When are we going to go? What's going to happen? Well, Dad gathered a few people, went to the side, started playing the guitar, and all of a sudden people's moods changed, and he was just able to do that. And I don't know if people realized from the video, but Oded had actually officially finished the army. The Operation Tzuk Protective Edge, that was almost 5 years ago, actually began, or he was called back, or given the option, I should say, because he really volunteered to go back on the actual day, I think, of his release.
I think that's the part that is hard to comprehend, that those guys, not just him, but the rest of his squad, they had the option to not join that war because they already finished their army service in a way. And he came back as a reserve. And that discussion that...
even though he wasn't officially called back either, he wasn't really on Miloim, he was...
Yeah, he didn't have to, because for the first year you don't have to go back. And the video just showed us how he took the whole squad together and he told them, you know what, guys, whoever feels like it's too much for him, no judgment, just go. And he had this finesse about him and he said, I'm here, I'm staying. And they all stayed. And he lost his life a couple of weeks after, or a couple of less.
And
sorry?
No, just these memories are coming back as we're talking about it. And just his ability. I actually remember at one point myself just sort of couldn't wait to get out of the army, didn't know what I was doing here. And his ability just to have a regular conversation with someone, but make them feel like they were on top of the world, was amazing, just a real gift. But he used that gift all the time to help others, and of course, that's a gift that was lost, and such a special person that was lost to the world 5 years ago. And we'll come back to Oded at the end, but Ariel, I also wanted to ask you about a special story from your own family. Your grandfather, I should tell people, for those who don't know, was Yehuda Avner. If you don't know who Yehuda Avner was, you should at least know who the Prime Ministers. And the story is actually about his sister. So your sister-in-law, sorry. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
And I will, and I think that the special thing about this story, following up Oded's story, and with the gap of 48 to 2014, so you did a quick math, we're talking about
2014, so 66 years.
66 years. The thing that is, as you get older, correct me if I'm wrong, the thing that is hard to comprehend is the fact that Oded will forever stay 22. And he lost his life in the army.
You know, something that I was thinking about before I came here, that, you know, that means one thing when we're 22 and when we're serving the army, but as we go through life, and you reach certain very happy, thank God, stages in your life, marriage, kids, and you realize that these people will never have that.
And did they prepare for it? And that's I think is something that people don't comprehend. When you're in the army, you don't really think you're going to die at 99.9% of the time. I'm just going to read, I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of my great auntie Esther Settingold, the biography. So Esther Settingold was the oldest child of Moshe and Anne Settingold. She was born and raised in London. Her family, my great-great-grandfather had a book-selling and publishing business in London. She finished in 46 with honors studies of English at the University of London, and now her great nephew is sitting here with a broken English, so I think it's a bit poetic. Esther's Zionism was reinforced by the horrors of the Holocaust and British betrayal of the Palestine Mandate. She applied for a post as an English teacher at the Evelyn de Rothschild School in Jerusalem. So basically, at a very young age, I think she was 18 at the time, she decided, she was very Zionistic, obviously, she decided to leave London and to go to Jerusalem, what at the time was fighting the Israel War of Independence. So as she arrived there, she witnessed the violence of the British and the cruelty towards the Jews, and I think it got her more and more riled up and understand that she needs to do something. So in 47, she joined the Haggadah. She continued a teaching job and began attending the training camps. In January 48, she left the school of Evelyn de Rothschild and became a full-time Haganah soldier. So we're talking about a 19-year-old girl from London becoming an Haganah soldier during the toughest time. In addition to the military duties and continuing training, she was an announcer for the Haganah's English language broadcasting service and volunteered to join the defenders of the Jewish order in the Old City of Jerusalem. So I'm skipping a lot to where she got injured. So the Transjordan Arab Legion was occupying that part of the Jewish border, which was, there was attacks on it on a daily basis with 25 pounds of cannon of British mortars and machine guns, with virtually unlimited supply of ammunition. Resistance was hopeless. She was part of the defenders, and she had what they had as stun guns. You can correct me if I'm wrong with the way I'm pronouncing it. So that's what Hazikkaron became, a stun gunner. On May 26, the Arab forces blew up a building as she was entering it. Her spine was shattered and she was carried to the quarters infirmary manned by the Hadassah organization. As there were no supplies and poor facilities, little could be done for her. The infirmary patients were evacuated the next day as the Arab Legion under Abdullah el-Tal fired on it, which is a war crime. Esther remained conscious and able to walk and continued to say her prayers. It was Shabbos, the 29th, May 29th, 1948, where she was racked by high fever and with an unbearable agony. Esther setting her lid on the floor at the second story of the monastery with the rest of the wounded. There was no morphine left. And one of the guys offered her a cigarette to ease the pain. So she lifted her hand and she was about to take the cigarette and lit it up, and then she said, "No, it's Shabbat." She was a very religious Jew. And that's were her last words, and she died about at 5 p.m. She was 22 years old. And I want to read the last letter she wrote to her parents back in England before she died. Dear mommy and daddy and everybody. If you get this at all, it will be, I suppose, typical of all my hurried, messy letters. I'm writing it to beg of you that whatever may have happened to me, you will make the effort to take it in the spirit that I want to understand that for myself, I have no regrets. We have had a bitter fight. I have tested the Gehenom, which is hell in Hebrew. But it was been worthwhile because I'm quite convinced that the end will see a Jewish state and the realization of our longings. I shall be only one of many who fell in sacrifice, and I was urged to write this because one in particular was killed today who meant a great deal to me. Because of the sorrow I felt, I want you to take it otherwise, to remember that we're soldiers and have the greatest and noblest cause to fight for. God is with us, I know, in this holy city, and I'm proud and ready to pay the price it may cost us to reprieve it. Don't think I've taken unnecessary risks. That does not pay when manpower is short. I hope you may have a chance of meeting any of my co-fighters who survived if I don't, and that you will be pleased and not sad of how they talk of me. Please, please do not be sadder than you can help. I have lived my life fully, if briefly, and I think this is the best way, short and sweet. Very sweet it has been here in our own land. I hope you should enjoy from Mimi, who's my grandmother, and Asher, my great uncle, that satisfaction you missed in me. Let it be without regrets, and then I too shall be happy. I'm thinking of you all, every single one of you and the family, and I'm full of pleasure at the thought that you will one day, very soon, I hope, come and enjoy the fruits of what for which we were fighting. Much, much love. Be happy and remember me in happiness. Shalom and Litraot, your loving Esther.
So tragic and in some ways also beautiful story.
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, we just had the Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Day last week, and it connects, you know, between Yom HaZikaron and the Holocaust Day. I think this letter is a great connection, because to understand the motivation of this young girl, you have to understand what they've been through, I think. And that goes back to what they did for me. That's an easy connection, you know, to 66 years, we said. And people are giving their lives for the same cause, and for all of us, I think, to be safe and to live in this world. And you know, I think the only thing we can take from it is you know, how we can be better, how we can do our share.
I mean, on the one hand, you look from the story of your auntie to 2014 with the dead Ben Sira, 2020 today, and how far the Jewish people have come, the Jewish state has come. You look at Israel in 1948 and 1947, and now in 2020, and how fortunate we are. And on the other hand, tragic and sad, and that's what we're commemorating, that still 66, 72 years later, we still have to fight for our existence. We're still losing soldiers. And that's what Yom HaZikaron's about. So, do you have any final words?
Again, I think for me, what I take from Yom HaZikaron today, because I think every Yom HaZikaron is a bit different. And I think every Yom HaZikaron that has a bit of a different meaning as you grow up. But I think it's about, you know, we have to respect the ones that are not here, that have given the greatest sacrifice. You know, by just doing the right thing on our daily worlds, from the smallest things to the bigger things, and understand that other people gave everything for us to be able to live in Israel happily and just to live as Jews, I think, in Australia or anywhere else.
So for me, it was, you know, like I came to the army, I've been in yeshiva before for a few years, but for me, coming into the army, you know, that was just one big shock, probably from the beginning to the end. But just being able to realize that there are so many people from so many different backgrounds, and so many different parts of the country with so many different beliefs. But at the end of the day, that's what really holds Israel together, is the ability to put your lives on the line for Israel, no matter what, to protect it, if need be, to sacrifice your life. And I think for me, we talk about Yom HaZikaron, and like you said, every year, and Rabbi actually ended with this as well, every year it means something different as you sort of move through your own stages. Thank God we've been able to move through those stages in our lives and realize that their lives got left behind.
Yeah.
Our dad will always be 22. Your auntie's always 19. They didn't get the opportunities that we did. And so Yom HaZikaron, we need to remember them, but we also need to remember what they gave their lives for. And like you said, even in the little things that we do, how we continue to honor their memory, and continue to make sure that the state of Israel not just exists, but thrives.
Amen.
Ariel, thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah,
we should do this again soon. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll hand over again to Rav Gad.
Thank you, Rav Shuat. Just thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and just should have a memorable Yom HaZikaron. Just have in mind, do an extra mitzvah, Lilu Nishmat. I just want to share a 1 minute Dvar Torah on the idea. So I studied in a number of different yeshivot, some of them quite, some more Haredi. And I remember one of the big challenges that came out in Yom HaZikaron was the question of why should Israeli soldiers get a day, you know, for themselves? I mean, every Jew that dies, especially if they die for being Jewish, is equal. Why should these soldiers somehow get a day that they get elevated above all other people in the world? And for a long time, I thought it was a good question. So why is a Jew who gets killed in the streets of Belgium or the streets of France or, in the West Bank or Gaza, why should we distinguish that these ones get their own days and others? And I didn't have a good answer for a while. And then just sort of dawned on me at one stage that imagine you were one of the Jews, Israelis that were taken hostage on Entebbe. Your plane was hijacked and you were taken to Uganda. And the state of Israel sent out crack troops to come and rescue you. And in the process of the rescue, Yoni Netanyahu, who was the leader, was killed. Every year, now that you've been saved from that experience, would you commemorate Yoni Netanyahu as your site? Would you say every year that on the day that you were rescued and that man who gave his life so you should live, would you recognize it? And I think the answer would be for all of us, absolutely. So you say, well, he's no more important than everybody else. All Jews that die. Says, yes, but to him I owe a debt of gratitude. Because if it wasn't for him, I would not have survived. And that is Yom Hazikkaron. Yom Hazikkaron is a day that we show not only commemorate and honor, but hakarat tov, appreciation for those who laid down their lives and made the ultimate sacrifice that we could have a Medina, that we could have a place called home that is safe to go there and allows us, even here in Australia, to feel safe. So each of us should light a candle, say a prayer, do an extra mitzvah, do ilu nishmat, to elevate the souls of those who gave the ultimate and paid the ultimate price that we could live in safety and security as Jews all over the world. Tiyeh nishmatam baruch, their souls should be blessed, and we should all remember them. Just last thing, tomorrow night is Yom Ha'atzmaut. We'll be having another program with David Kramer, who wrote a book talking about Israel's great humanitarian contributions to the world. There's a different Zoom link for that, but please join us all tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. I wish you all a Laila Tov.